It seems like everywhere you turn these days, someone's always shouting about some kind of political firestorm or another.
Yeah.
It's almost enough to make you want to completely unplug.
Right.
But you've chosen to dive in with us, so thank you for that.
Appreciate it.
You're specifically interested in how to resist this Project 2025 proposal that we keep hearing so much about.
And it's not just noise, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this blueprint is laying out some pretty radical plans
Okay.
to concentrate power and really changing how our government functions at its core.
Yeah, you even mentioned in your notes that the thought of this plan actually in action makes you want to just disappear.
Yeah,
Like, wipe it from your mind.
basically.
But that's not really an option for us, is it?
Not really.
So how do we move from that feeling of just being overwhelmed to taking action?
Well, I think the first thing is to just acknowledge that those feelings are totally valid.
Right.
Feeling overwhelmed is a natural response
Yeah.
to this kind of thing. But we also have to remember that history is full of examples where people successfully fought back against oppressive regimes.
Okay.
And the encouraging part is that these were ordinary people, not
Oh.
superheroes. They were using really clever and strategic methods.
That's reassuring.
Yeah.
So speaking of strategy, we've got Gene Sharp's 198 Methods of Nonviolent Action as our guide for this deep dive.
He's basically like the resistance movement playbook.
Exactly.
Sharp's work has been really influential in movements all over the world.
Wow.
Serbia, South Africa, you name it.
It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, and what's so fascinating about it is how this framework really highlights how powerful nonviolent action can be in creating change.
So for this deep dive, we've got a stack of articles, images we even pulled in your personal notes.
Yeah.
We're going to explore how Sharp's ideas can be put into practice,
Sounds good.
drawing on historical examples from the civil rights movement, all the way to the resistance against Pinochet in Chile, to even the toppling of Slobodan Milosevic.
Absolutely, and we'll connect those historical examples to potential actions you could take against Project 2025.
Perfect.
We'll analyze how these movements succeeded and also where they fell short, so we can give you a really solid understanding of what might be most effective in this situation.
Okay, so let's get tactical.
All right.
One thing you mentioned that I thought was interesting is that you just want to shut it all out.
Oh, yeah.
You want to escape the constant barrage of information.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And it brings us to this idea of starving the attention economy.
Okay.
It's like every click,
Yeah.
every share, every outraged comment,
Uh-huh.
it all fuels the very thing that you're trying to resist.
It's almost like
It's like
feeding a gremlin after midnight.
exactly.
Makes it stronger.
Yeah. So the first step is to create a conscious media diet.
Okay.
Unfollowing, muting, even blocking keywords that trigger you.
Wow.
It's like hitting the unsubscribe button on all the negativity.
I like that. So I guess that could even mean taking a break from certain people in your life.
Oh, absolutely.
Not forever, but,
Yeah.
people who are actively pushing that content or ideology.
Yeah, you have to prioritize your own mental well-being first.
Yeah.
Because you really can't fight effectively if you're constantly drained and demoralized.
That's a really good point.
Some of the sources we have even suggest considering temporary relocation to areas with less intense political climates,
Okay.
if that's feasible for you.
Yeah, if it's a matter of self-preservation,
Yeah.
sometimes you just need to step back and regroup.
For sure.
That's intense. But I see the logic.
Yeah.
It makes me think of this one image we have of a storefront with a giant boycott stamp on it.
Ah,
Do you remember that one?
I do. That visual really captures the power of collective resistance.
Yeah.
Because while personal choices are really important,
Yeah.
they have way more impact when they're combined with the actions of others.
It reminds me of historical movements like the Montgomery bus boycott.
Yeah.
Hitting them where it hurts the wallet.
Exactly.
Did boycotts play a role in the movements we're looking at for this deep dive?
They absolutely did.
Okay.
Boycotts have a long history of successfully applying pressure and forcing change.
And in a variety of situations.
Yeah, and in our sources, we see this mirrored in digital spaces as well.
Interesting.
Like images of people blocking hashtags and unfollowing media outlets that promote agendas that are harmful.
So it's got a modern digital version of a picket line.
Exactly.
I love that. And speaking of digital, the sources mentioned using humor and satire as weapons of resistance.
It's a really brilliant tactic
Yeah.
because Humor can make really complex issues more accessible,
Ah,
and it can also expose hypocrisy in a really powerful way.
okay.
We see examples of this in a few of the sources,
Like what?
like satirical songs and cartoons that were used to mock authoritarian figures and their policies,
Interesting.
and even these mock press conferences that were meant to highlight the absurdity of the rhetoric coming from Project 2025.
It makes you realize that even in the face of something that feels really scary, laughter can be a way to take back some of that power.
It really can.
Yeah,
And that sense of empowerment is really essential.
definitely. And speaking of which, one image that really struck me was this image of a diverse group of people discussing alternative news sources.
I know that one.
Yeah, it just felt like this little pocket of hope.
Yeah, that image really speaks to the importance of building resilience and finding alternative ways to stay informed.
Yeah.
We're bombarded with so much misinformation these days. It's just crucial to seek out reliable sources and engage in constructive conversations.
So it's not just about shutting out the bad.
Right.
It's about actively seeking out the good.
Absolutely.
But it's also about more than just talking, right?
Yeah.
It's about translating those discussions into action.
Right.
Like voting, campaigning, actually holding our elected officials accountable.
Yeah, those are all crucial parts of resistance.
Yeah. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here already. We've gone from feeling overwhelmed by this Project 2025 thing to having a clearer sense of what actions we can take, both personally and collectively.
Yeah.
But something still feels ominous.
Oh, yeah.
It's like they're not just targeting policies.
Right.
They're trying to control how we think, how we express ourselves.
You're picking up on something really important there, and we have one image that captures this perfectly.
Oh, really?
A massive mural mocking the figurehead of Project 2025.
Oh, wow.
It's bold,
Okay.
it's defiant, and it's clearly meant to be a direct challenge to those in power.
It reminds me of something I read about cultural warfare, where art and music are used as tools of resistance.
Yes.
Is that what we're seeing here?
You're absolutely right. That mural is a perfect illustration of cultural warfare in action. It's about using creative expression to challenge those in power,
Okay.
to disrupt their narratives, and to reclaim control of the cultural landscape.
So it's not just about changing laws or policies.
Yeah.
It's about shifting the entire conversation.
Exactly. Exactly. Think of the cacerolas in Chile.
What?
The cacerolas, people banging pots and pans every night to protest Pinochet's dictatorship.
Oh, wow.
Or think of the satirical songs that circulated during the Soviet era, poking fun at the regime and all its contradictions.
It's almost like they're saying, you can try to control our institutions,
Yeah.
but you can't control our creativity or our spirit or our ability to laugh in the face of oppression.
Yeah, exactly.
But how effective can something like a song or a mural really be? I mean, those in power often just seem so impervious.
That's where Gene Sharp's framework comes in.
Oh.
He argues that power ultimately rests on the consent of the governed.
Okay.
And when people withdraw that consent through nonviolent action, even seemingly small acts of defiance can begin to chip away at that power.
Okay, that makes sense. So something like a satirical song.
Yeah.
It's not just about making people laugh.
Right.
It's about planting seeds of doubt, encouraging them to question the status quo.
Exactly. And those seeds can spread. One of our sources mentions how these tactics were actually used in Serbia against Slobodan Milosevic.
Total.
They created these hilarious mock TV shows and radio programs that completely lampooned the regime and its propaganda.
Oh, wow. Did it work?
Well, it's hard to say definitively,
Yeah.
but many people believe that it played a role in delegitimizing Milosevic in the eyes of the public, and that ultimately contributed to his downfall.
So it created this sense that the emperor had no clothes.
Exactly.
Wow. So laughter really can be a powerful weapon.
It absolutely can be.
That's pretty amazing.
And the beautiful thing is it's a weapon that anyone can wield.
Right.
You don't need any special training or resources to write a funny song or create a piece of protest art.
So we've got boycotts, we've got satire, we've got creative expression.
Yeah.
It's starting to feel like a real arsenal of resistance is building here.
It is, and remember that image we talked about earlier of the group gathered around a table discussing alternative news sources?
Yeah, it felt like this spark of hope in the midst of all the chaos.
Well, that image speaks to a concept Gene Sharp called alternative institutions.
Alternative institutions.
Yeah, he argued that for resistance to be truly effective, you need to create these parallel structures that operate outside of the existing power structures.
So it's not just about resisting the bad, It's about actively building the good.
Precisely. Think of it like building a lifeboat while the ship is sinking.
Okay.
You need a place to escape, a way to sustain yourself and keep your community afloat while you're navigating the storm.
That's a powerful image. And one of our sources actually shows a real-life example of this.
Oh, yeah.
A community-run clinic that was set up in response to the government cutting healthcare funding.
That's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's about empowering communities to take care of themselves, to provide for their own needs, and to create systems of support that are independent of those in power.
It's making me think about those feelings of being overwhelmed that we talked about earlier. Maybe part of the antidote is not just about disengaging from the negativity, but actively engaging with the positive.
I think you're really onto something there. We often focus so much on what we're against that we forget to cultivate what we're for.
Right.
Building those alternative institutions, fostering community, connecting with like-minded individuals, all of that helps us reclaim our power and build something better in the process.
It's like that quote, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Exactly. And the more we focus on creating that positive future, the less energy we have for the things that drain us.
Okay, so we've got cultural warfare, we've got alternative institutions. What other strategies can we explore?
Well, one tactic that's been incredibly effective throughout history is the use of symbolic action.
Okay.
Think of the protesters who lay down in front of tanks during the Tiananmen Square protests, or the activists who chain themselves to trees to prevent deforestation.
Right, we have a couple of images that illustrate this. One shows a line of protesters holding blank signs silently facing a government building, and another one shows people blocking the entrance to a bank with their bodies.
These are powerful examples of what Gene Sharp called nonviolent obstruction.
Violent obstruction.
It's about using your physical presence to disrupt the normal functioning of things, to make a statement that's impossible to ignore.
And it seems like these tactics are often designed to provoke a reaction from those in power.
Right.
To expose their brutality or their hypocrisy.
Exactly. The goal is to create a moral dilemma for those in power, to force them to either back down or to reveal their true nature to the world.
But don't these kinds of actions put the protesters at risk?
Well,
I mean, the image of those people lying down in front of tanks is pretty terrifying.
there's always a risk involved in any act of resistance.
Yeah.
But the power of nonviolent action lies in its ability to expose the violence of the oppressor.
So it's like a judo move, using their own force against them.
Exactly. And the more brutal the response, the more likely it is to backfire and galvanize public support for the resistance.
Okay.
Think of the images of police brutality during the civil rights movement.
Yeah.
Those images shocked the world and helped turn the tide of public opinion.
So it's not just about disrupting the physical operations of things.
No.
It's about disrupting the narrative.
Right.
About exposing the truth.
Precisely. And sometimes the most effective disruptions are the ones that are the most unexpected.
Do you have any examples of that?
Well, one tactic that comes up a lot in our research is the use of what's called mockery.
Mockery.
Yeah, think of the yes men.
Okay.
Those activists who impersonate corporate executives and make these outrageous pronouncements that expose the hypocrisy of big business.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. They're hilarious.
They are, but their work is also incredibly effective by using humor and absurdity.
Yeah.
They're able to cut through the spin and reveal the truth in a way that's both entertaining and impactful.
So it's like a Trojan horse for truth, sneaking past people's defenses and planting seeds of doubt.
Exactly, and those seeds can grow into something much bigger.
It seems like all of these tactics are about more than just resisting those in power. It's about awakening the consciousness of the people.
You're absolutely right. Ultimately, the success of any resistance movement hinges on the will of the people. And all of these tactics are ultimately aimed at inspiring that will, at reminding people of their own power, and at encouraging them to take action.
We've covered a lot of ground here today, from cultural warfare to alternative institutions, from symbolic action to mockery. It feels like we've been given a crash course in the art of resistance.
It has been a lot.
Yeah, but before we get too carried away, I think we need to take a moment to ground ourselves and come back to the specifics of this Project 2025.
You're right. Let's shift gears and dive into how these incredible tactics can be directly applied to resist this particular threat.
Okay, so we're back and ready to apply everything we've discussed to Project 2025.
Let's do it.
This thing feels so sprawling and insidious.
Right.
Where do we even begin?
Well, remember that image we saw of a highway overpass with that giant banner reading, "Democracy over dictatorship"?
Yeah, it was bold.
It felt like a gut punch to those in power, right?
Yeah, it did. And it's a good reminder that one way to start is by just making resistance visible. Like injecting it into the everyday landscape.
Exactly. And we see echoes of that in a few other sources, too.
Oh, like what?
Like banner drops, stickers plastered around cities, even fake newsstands with headlines that expose Project 2025's more troubling aspects.
It's about reclaiming those spaces.
Right.
And not letting their messages completely dominate.
Exactly.
But how do we move beyond just raising awareness? We talked about boycotts earlier.
Right.
Could those be effective against something like Project 2025?
Absolutely. One of our sources specifically suggests targeting businesses and media outlets that openly support the Project 2025 agenda.
Okay.
Like hitting their bottom line can be a very powerful motivator.
It's about leveraging our economic power as consumers and citizens.
Exactly.
But what about those people who are already on board with Project 2025?
Yeah.
Is there any point in engaging with them at all, or are they just a lost cause?
You know, Gene Sharp actually argued that it's crucial to create opportunities for what he called conversion.
Conversion.
And this doesn't mean browbeating people with facts and figures.
Yeah.
It's about fostering dialogue and understanding.
Right, like remember that image of the protesters confronting that politician with their voting record?
I do.
It felt more strategic than just shouting slogans.
Exactly. It's about holding individuals accountable, but also appealing to their sense of reason and fairness.
Okay.
And sometimes humor can be a surprisingly effective tool for this.
Humor, really? How does that work?
Well, think about the impact of satirical news programs, like The Daily Show.
Yeah.
Or even the work of political cartoonists.
Right.
They use humor to expose hypocrisy and make these really complex issues more digestible.
So it's not about changing minds overnight.
No.
It's more about planting seeds of doubt, making people question what they've been told.
Exactly. And the more those seeds spread, the more cracks start to appear in the facade of Project 2025.
Speaking of cracks, there's this one image that I haven't been able to get out of my head.
Which one?
It's the one of that government official publicly tearing up their party membership card.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It felt like such a powerful act of defiance.
It really was. And that image perfectly illustrates the impact of what Gene Sharp called symbolic defection.
Symbolic defection.
When people within the system start to break ranks, it sends such a strong signal to others that it's okay to question authority.
Yeah, and it's not just about those grand public gestures, right?
No.
It can also be about smaller, quieter acts of resistance.
Of course.
A government worker subtly undermining a harmful policy, or a teacher challenging the dominant narrative in their classroom.
Absolutely. Every act of defiance, no matter how small, contributes to the larger movement.
So it's like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Spreading outwards and creating waves of change.
Right. Exactly.
It's inspiring to think about the potential of all these actions combined, but sometimes it just feels like we're fighting an uphill battle.
I understand that feeling, but remember, the struggle for a more just and equitable world, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
There will be setbacks, there will be moments of despair, but we have to remember that we're not alone in this fight.
You're right. There's that one image in our sources that really drives that point home.
Oh, which one?
The image of protesters outside of a U.S. embassy in Europe.
Yeah.
Holding these banners that read, "Global Solidarity for Democracy."
That's such a powerful reminder that resistance transcends borders.
Yeah.
We're part of this global movement of people who are committed to democratic values, to human rights, to a better future for all.
And that connection can provide very practical support, too.
Absolutely.
Like the economic sanctions and boycotts we talked about. Those often have much more impact when they're coordinated on an international level.
For sure. By working together, sharing strategies, amplifying each other's voices, we can create a force that is truly unstoppable.
Wow. We've covered so much ground in this deep dive, from personal disengagement to collective action, from cultural warfare to global solidarity. It feels like we've been given a crash course in the art of resistance.
I think so, too.
So what will your act of resistance be?
Yeah.
How will you use your voice, your creativity, your resources to push back against Project 2025 and create a better future?
That's the question we want to leave you with, because the future isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
It's something that we create together.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the issues that matter most.
And in the meantime, stay curious, stay engaged, and never stop resisting.